I hope you're as excited as I am to really dive deep into this and get the ball rolling. Now, I've always had an idea to build a site like this. I just never did it. So I'm going to bring you along for the ride so you could see line by line how I build out a WordPress website. You get to see how I stumble upon things, how I resolve issues, how I evaluate my options, see how I configure things, and basically just come along for the ride. You get to see this line by line. Now, I haven't built this out just yet. I haven't run through this, so we're really going to encounter any issues, we're going to encounter them together. What I'm going to do is I want to just take each video and cover a topic for you. This first video, it's going to be the setup of the site. I have gone through and kind of picked out themes and plugins that I think are going to work for this. But again, I haven't really built the entire site and tied everything together just yet. So just for the sake of brevity, I kind of went ahead and did some of these things, but I will talk about what I was going through when we get to those points. Now, the requirements for this, and I asked this of any of my clients, is why are we really doing this, right? What's the end goal? Now, for myself, as a kid, some of my fondest memories are really sitting around the dining room table, pulling out photo albums, shoe boxes full of photos, and just looking through them with my parents and grandparents, where we got a sense of, I got a sense of who my family was, what journey they went on. I mean, my grandparents traveled a lot, so I saw some of the places that they went to, heard the stories. So some of these things are really fond memories that I have. Now, today in digital age, we know we're Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all these other sites out there. We're taking pictures all the time on our phones, uploading them to these social media sites. We don't really have a photo album anymore, right? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to build a site that can aggregate all of this stuff so that I can sit there with my kids and my family and share memories, and so that they have those same fond memories that I have when I was growing up. Now, that's the why. So it's basically, I want to be able to own all of these photos myself and stories and things like that. Like, let's say, Instagram's already been bought out by Facebook, right? So what if Facebook decides, okay, Instagram, we're not going to support it anymore, we're going to kill it. Now all of my stuff is on Instagram. I don't have those photos unless I'm very diligent about backing those things up. A lot of us aren't, so, and I know I'm not, so I want to be able to own these things. So that's kind of like a secondary thing. So what I'm going to do is I want to just jump right into it with you and get the ball rolling, and basically in this video walk you through the site. We're going to set up our admin user that we're going to use for the development of the site. We're going to change some of the settings, and then as a pro bonus tip, I'm going to show you how to build the code into a source code repository. So let's get into it right here. Now, I've installed WordPress. I haven't installed it. I downloaded it and kind of set it up, right? So everything I'm doing here is on my local machine, but this will work anywhere else, right? So you have a host. This is the one press install, I guess they call them. I'm not sure, right? But so here we go. We got the install here. But before we actually click on this button, continue here, I want to go through some of the initial steps that I find that a lot of people don't do. Now, everything is in the config file, the wp-config.php file. And what happens is a lot of people just take everything as default. Now, when you look in here, you get to see the database configurations. You get to see some salts here. You get to see a table prefix. So there's a lot of configurations going in here, but a lot of people just take this as default. Now, at times, if you download this from the WordPress.org website, you're actually just going to get text in here, and it's going to say please change or something to that effect. If you have that one-click install kind of deal, they'll probably generate some of these. At least some of them do anyway. So what I want to do is I want to go through this file and basically change some things. Now, these things are all items that you're going to wind up setting up. You're going to have to set it up yourself. And it's to your discretion on what you name your database user and password. I would suggest doing strong passwords with special characters, maybe 10 or 15 characters. Since this is my local, WP as a password works, because if you have my laptop, then it really doesn't matter at that point, right? So what I'm going to do is, first thing, we're going to go to WordPress.org's website for the salt. Now, this is just a site that generates these salts, so it couldn't be easier to do this. Now, as you can see, when I refresh the page, it changes. So I'm just going to grab the whole block here, copy it, and I'm going to paste it into here by overriding this. Now that just makes sure that now I have a unique salt that is for my website. Now, the idea behind salts are, and I won't get too deep into this, but it goes along with the cookies and the logged in users and things like that, where you kind of need, you want a unique salt there. So the next thing I'm going to do is change the prefix. Now, a lot of people don't do this. This is some of the low-hanging fruit that really could save you in the long run for some security. I really highly suggest that if you are setting up your website, the very first run through, just go ahead and change this prefix to something other than WP underscore, because as the default WP underscore, a hacker's going to know that 95% of the people out there are never going to touch this. So they're going to know what tables they need to alter. So when they do any type of an attack, they're just going to assume that the table names are unchanged, right? The table prefixes are unchanged. And obviously, as WordPress goes, being open source, we all know what the table names are. So do yourself a favor and change this to anything you want. It could, it could be anything. So I'm just going to call it the Resnick family photo album, right? Underscore. So that's just it. That's all I have to do there. Now, when we walk through the install here, continue, we'll call this now here, this is the admin user. I fly through this the first time because we're going to change it anyway. And this is again for security purposes. You just want to use anything but admin. But since I know I'm going to delete this user, I'm just going to call it admin. And now I'm going to just put in this password. And it's very weak because it's short, but I don't really care because I'm just going to delete this user anyway. And now I'm going to use my the email address. And for right here, for now, since I'm only developing it, I'll take that off. So now that this was set up, the next step we're going to do is we're going to log in. And once we're in, we see we have the WordPress site set up. You can even look at the front end of the site. Works, looks as it should out of the box using the 2015 theme because I'm on the latest version of WordPress. So the first thing that I'm going to do, as I said, is delete this user. So, and the reason being is that knowing that when you set up a WordPress site, as a hacker goes, they're going to assume that the first user is the admin user. So with that being the admin user in the administrator role, it's going to have the most amount of impact for the site. It's going to have all the permissions, it's going to be able to change all the settings. So we want to get rid of that. We don't want the attacker to, again, hit on the low-hanging fruit and just be able to say, okay, user ID of 1 is the admin. We don't want that assumption. So instead, I always just remove it. Now, since I'm logged in, I can't just remove it. I have to create another one. Now, what I do is I just go ahead and I create a user in you can put any username that you want and any password. I'm gonna create a strong password here. I'm going to use that password. I don't send this password to any user, even myself, because let's say somebody gets a hold of my email, then they can get into that password. And I'll show you here in a second what I do to solve this problem. If I want to send this to somebody else, like my wife, let's say, and after I set up her user account, I'm going to show you what I do. So I'm going to change this role to an administrator and click add new user. Now this user's in here, right? So now we can delete this user by logging out first. And now I'm going to log in with that specific user that I just created. And now I'm going to delete that first user. Now there's no user with the ID of 1, right? So I have an administrator. If basically it's just, again, like I said, it's low-hanging fruit, right? If we can deter or help prevent an attacker getting into our site by just eliminating some of these low-hanging fruit items, then they're just going to move on because they don't really care. They're not going to go too deep into you. If they really want to get into you, they will. But if they want to use your site as an exploit, if the low-hanging fruit's not there and that's how they're getting into 95% of sites out there, then they're just going to move on from your site. So that's what I do. So I changed the table prefix. I also removed that first user. Now, as I mentioned, when I create another user, I don't want to send that password through an email address, right? There's this great site out there called quickforget.com. And basically what you can do here is you can put in whatever message you want, right? So let's say I'm putting in a password, right? I'm just going to do something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this forget after or 24 hours, right? I normally set it at, depending on who I'm sending it to. If they're waiting for it, then I'm going to just remove it after 12 hours. And I always set it to one view. And what this does is it allows you to save this and then you can send this URL to somebody. And what happens is when they click into this URL, they see it for the first time, and then they're going to get this. They're going to see the password that you create. Now, if somebody gets a hold of that person's email and they click this link, then they're not going to see anything, right? So if I hit this again, see? Sorry, I've already forgotten the secret. So you can see how there's a little bit extra security in there where we're not sending passwords as plain text through email. So now that we have the user set up, we have the site set up, the next thing I want to do is I want to just change some of these settings. Since we've set up the site with that admin user, that's the email address that's going to be in here. Now, because I'm not going to really check this email address, or this is an email address that I couldn't, is associated to another user, I'm just going to change that to whatever I want. Now, I also want to find out, is this a site that I want people to register on? If so, then we'll click on anyone can register. If not, then just leave it off. I happen to be in the New York time zone, which I'm going to change as soon as I find New York here. And then everything else I'll leave the same here. Oh, I forgot. The tagline. Do yourself a favor and change this tagline. It could be to anything. I mean, even if you change it to the site title, fine. But what happens is this is actually going to show up in the headline up here, and you don't want to have just another WordPress site, right? So so just change that. And the final thing that we're going to change today is the permalinks. By default, it comes out with this query string and an ID. You want to change it to the post name, at least. You can change it to the date with the post if you want. Some say that's better than this. I usually change it to this because it makes it shorter. It's a matter of preference, but what you want to do is you want to get away from the IDs here and to something that's more search engine friendly. And then we save it. Now, if we go visit the site, everything is exactly the same as we set it before. I want to show you how to get this into a repository. So by doing this, it's real simple. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use my iTerm. Bring this in here for you. So what I'm going to do here is jump into the sites directory. Now, this is again a pro tip. I always lock my sites into a repository. And I do this because then it's easier to back out of things if I mess something up. And I do that by making sure that everything in the WP content directory is in that source controlled environment. I use Git for this. There's SVN as well. I'm just comfortable with Git. So I put the WP content directory in there because to me, that's the website. It's got the plugins, it's got the themes, and without that directory, the site is just the core WordPress site. I could keep the whole thing, even core, into the repository. There's just a lot of technical reasons why I don't. So for now, I'm just going to show you what I do by typing in git init dot, and now that's going to basically put everything in this directory initialized into that repository. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add everything into it. Now, when I commit this, it's going to, as the initial commit, that's going to kind of like put a little pin in it. That's going to allow me to, if I mess something up into the future, allow me to roll back to this where I know everything is working. And that's usually my stamp for making commits. As soon as I know whatever I'm working on is working, then I make a commit. So when I actually look at the log, I can see, oh, this is the initial commit. I can roll back to that if I need to. So with that being said, I think this is a good stopping point. The next video, we're going to actually go through and set up the theme and get this site, start rolling with the site and get it built out.